Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and Star Crasher at KingComics.CA. Check out my other videos, King Comics 2021 is the channel on YouTube. Check out my Instagram, MaximusRex13, or check out my Facebook, MaxRex and or Big Baby. So guys, today is Rob Liefeld Day, so once again, we're looking at some of his early work, his first published work for a mainstream publisher, DC Comics. This is Hawk and Dove number 3, Kestrel Comes. Not going to make the obvious joke, but you know where I'm going with this. Kestrel kills after he comes, I guess, is what the writers here are trying to tell us, I guess, or the copy on this cover. So this is December 1988, so early on in Rob Liefeld's career, as I mentioned already. Kestrel, I think, is a Rob Liefeld creation, obviously kind of based on Hawk and Dove, kind of the evil version of both of them kind of combined together, I guess, maybe. You know, there's some stuff here where I'm going to talk a lot about, I think in this issue we see the beginnings of Rob Liefeld style here and there. Things like the hair maybe is still kind of 80s, but definitely the type of line work he's going to use later on, you know, and push that forward as far as hairstyles go for his women and his men. But I'm still feeling kind of a strong George Perez vibe in his artwork at this point in the late 80s, in some of the rendering, you know, and some of that stuff will eventually kind of morph into Rob Liefeld. So as far as the cover goes, obviously they're trying to, you know, kind of showcase Kestrel. He looks pretty cool for 1988. Pretty good design there. I think I mentioned before that I kind of like his design in that it's a Rob Liefeld design. There's kind of an extreme, you know, proto-extreme kind of aspect to it with, you know, the claws, the spiky gauntlets, these kind of cape spiky things coming out of them, which I sometimes wonder if Azrael was copied from that, right? The Joe Quesada series that he drew that introduced the character that would eventually replace Batman in the 90s for a while after his back was broken. Check it out. Just, you know, look it up on Google if you don't know what I'm talking about. Nightfall, is that what? Yeah, Nightfall and Knight's Quest and all that stuff. But yeah, so the actual design is very Rob Liefeld-y or Liefeld-ish, but has kind of that classic symmetrical superhero, supervillains thing that kind of has always been in superheroes, at least up to the 90s, where, you know, things got very asymmetrical with Spawn and the Liefeld characters and stuff like that. Cable, right, is maybe the first best example of that. So Rob Liefeld's still kind of working within the classic confines. And like I said, I've talked before about how I really like the Prophet design, actually, the design of the actual character named Prophet for Image. And he's got a very symmetrical design too. I find when Rob Liefeld goes asymmetrical, it's more typical of his style. But for some reason, I tend to prefer his designs that are symmetrical. It tends to kind of, you know, make a bit of order out of all the chaos of his costume designs. So yeah, cover showcases Kestrel. The whole back is kind of monochrome orange and tones, which is kind of interesting. You don't see a lot of that. I kind of like it. Slightly kind of 70s vintage look to it. And that's enough about the cover. Let's have a look inside. Excuse me. All right, so first thing I laughed at when I opened this first page is the poses are slightly awkward and kind of stiff, but I mean, it works, right? It works for superhero comics, so not so bad. But you know, some of that stiffness and some of the foreshortening and different angles that Rob Liefeld will draw his characters from is apparent early on, and he still suffers from some of these issues even today. Like I've always found he draws like an odd kind of midsection here when the legs are starting to overlap and foreshorten a little bit. Anyways, so what actually made me laugh is this down here. So if we read the credits, Barbara and Carl Kessel, the writers, this guy called Ron Liefeld is the penciler. So that's pretty funny to me, obviously. So back then, not a known commodity at all. So making a mistake, whether the guy's name is Ron or Rob, doesn't really matter. Hints with these background characters here of, you know, if you look closely, those look like, you know, simple kind of Liefeld layouts that he would still kind of do today for smaller characters in the background. That hasn't changed much. The kind of arms akimbo and legs kind of spread out, the Marvel pose, I guess is what I would call it, you know, from the drawing comics the Marvel way. When someone's standing there, you know, he shouldn't just be standing there. He should be kind of spread out and ready for action. So yeah, so if you look at some of these faces is where I see kind of the George Perez influence early on. I don't know if he's been exposed to Art Adams by this point. I would assume so, because some figures here and there will kind of remind me of that. But there's some stuff here where I feel like this doesn't look typically like Liefeld, and maybe is just anatomically and foreshortened wise, just maybe more sound than most Rob Liefeld stuff. Kestrel looks good everywhere. He's always got that kind of shit-eating grin he's got, kind of jokery. You know, is he a little bit influenced kind of by Venom? I'm wondering sometimes. Venom's out by then. And for sure, Rob Liefeld is looking at Todd McFarlane. I don't know if they've become buddies yet in 1988, but he for sure has seen some of his art. And I'm sure he's taken a few cues from McFarlane and trying to incorporate that into his work as well. Always got these weird small mouths. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Almost like puckered up mouths. And again, not going to make the obvious joke and leave it at that. Obviously, this is not pure Liefeld, right? He's being inked. I feel like the inker is being kind of pretty true to the pencils, but also helping out here and there when there might be some awkwardness in what Liefeld's laid down in the pencils. This here for sure is, you know, I've seen this eventually kind of becomes like the way he draws Wolverine's face and stuff. These are the beginnings of the Liefeld style on the head here. Kestrel's ears are out. That's odd to me. That's like a weird detail I didn't notice until now. Has that been established everywhere? His ear's out here. It's kind of in the dark here. Everywhere it's black. Well, that's a weird detail. So his ears are out. Yeah, here too. So is that hair? What is that? This is the beginning of you know, ambiguous Liefeld costume designs where, you know, from certain angles you just don't know exactly what's going on. Yeah, so this seems kind of like a McFarlane mouth down here to me. This as well. Kind of a cool drawing though. There's something I like about this. He got kind of, his face got frozen or something. Pretty cool. Doesn't look typically Liefeld, and I think that panel there looks pretty cool. So actually drawing some parts of some plane here, I guess, is what Liefeld's doing. I mean, there's certainly a decent amount of backgrounds, like a normal amount when you're reading a DC comic back then. You know, you're not going, hey man, is this guy, you know, trying to get out of drawn backgrounds like you would later. He's got some minimal stuff so you can see where everything's going pretty much. You know, here's maybe where he starts a bit of that Liefeld trope, and I think he probably gets this from McFarlane as well. These kind of, you know, hatched lines to define just the wall behind him or make it a little more interesting. These sequences, I mean, look at the fashion sense and the times is pretty funny to look at. I mean, again, the more interesting elements for me as an artist are to look at his backgrounds here, because you just don't get this from Rob Liefeld after like 1992 or something. And he's actually putting in the effort of kind of establishing a spot and, you know, shooting it from different angles, which is one of the hardest things when you're doing comic books is, you know, shooting everything, being consistent from angle to angle so things don't change or proportions don't change when you're drawing characters. And so perspectives and widths and proportions in relation to the environment as well are super important. I think he does a pretty good job here, even though, you know, it's not a super interesting page. Okay, now we're getting into Liefeld territory, I feel, because there's a bit of a deadline kind of feel to these pages, right? So the figures, you know, in action, pretty good overall. We're getting some Liefeldisms. I feel like the way he's drawn the muscles here is like something he will continue on, you know, adding onto in more detail and more muscle and more ripple and more veins and that. But I mean, the basic kind of structure is there. And I mean, there's some proportion problems here in foreshortening as well. So the hands are super tiny in a weird way. And the head's kind of big, actually, for at least superhero proportions in this panel here. Yeah, the proportions get, like, they get kind of stocky all of a sudden on this page with, like, their thighs and stuff. Oh, yeah, this ad, eh? So in around the same time as that famous moment in comics. So basically, Dove stops him here. Is that what's going on? He's about to kind of give the killing blow to Hawk after this all-out battle. And I mean, for 1988, again, that's a pretty cool design, I think. If you're given the task of redesigning Dove, you know, clearly not already one of the more interesting characters, I would say. I mean, you know, before this, I don't think there's just the original series, and no one's really interested in bringing them back. I guess the idea of bringing Dove back as a woman made it seem new and fresh and probably surely was at that moment when it came out. And I will say that, yeah, the redesign kind of works, right? And it's fairly similar to what we're going to get in the Hawk and Dove series from the 2000 somethings that we're going to be reviewing soon. Pretty similar. And again, I think it's successful because it's Rob Liefeld doing his kind of, you know, crazy designs. Obviously, he has to keep some of those Dove elements. So, you know, these kind of wing-tipped boots and gloves, excuse me, I think are from the original Dove. That cape, right? Kind of a decent idea. And the fact that it's pretty much symmetrical, except for the hairdo maybe. Once again, more of a classic, you know, inspired costume design than the asymmetrical stuff that he's going to end up doing a lot of. But yeah, KESTREL, I think is I keep forgetting his name. He's, yeah, to me he's just kind of like an evil looking Wolverine, like he's kind of Wolverine and Venomish. I feel like that's where the inspiration comes. You know, he still again has that constraint of having him somehow tie into this bird theme, Hawk and Dove. I think he pulls it off pretty well though. Again with this character, I think the coolest thing about the series, I keep mentioning it, is this KESTREL character and his design. So Dove comes in and she's pretty adept at kicking this guy's ass. So, you know, kind of showing up Hawk there because he's supposed to be like the, you know, the fighter guy, I guess is how I describe him. Wondering if his ankle is broken here. That's just a bad drawing thing, but yeah, it certainly looks like he's broken his ankle here. So yeah, here's like, I'll point out shots where, you know, this whole thing to me looks like a George Perez kind of rip off a little bit, right? Just in the finish and stuff, and even the hair, and the kind of hatching going through it. And that's where I think, you know, Rob Liefeld pushes that later on and makes it more extreme, but that's where it started off, is with him kind of, you know, doing a George Perez thing. That's a good example, I think, of, you know, something that looks that way. And, you know, the George Perez style hatching eventually morphs into that Rob Liefeld style of hatching. Great kind of pissed off shot here. Looks pretty good. Yeah, this is, you know, I will give him credit for actually doing backgrounds and stuff, but I mean, it's kind of stiff, right? Does do a good job of establishing it, right? There's something where, like, you know, some shots it almost looks like, I never liked Animal Man, right? I never thought the art was that great. And early Rob Liefeld like this working at DC, there's some pages that kind of feel like that Animal Man art. No offense to whoever the artist is, I forget his name. It's kind of an amateurish vibe that we're getting. You know, it's like an amateur trying to do professional looking comics, you know, like I said, trying to ape George Perez and stuff a bit, and probably getting about 75-80% of the way there. But hey, I mean, professional enough to be working on Hawk and Dove, not taking anything away from him. He's doing this at a very early age, so props. It's normal to have, you know, growing pains. So we're back on campus, and I feel like this is like the original Dove character from what I remember from the original drawings by Steve Ditko. And again, like, I feel like some of these more pedestrian pages, I mean, there's still some action going on, but there's not superhero stuff going on. There's like just a George Perez thing. And we're left with this cliffhanger here with this gentleman. Something about the rendering in the pants that, like, I kind of find funky and cool. It's kind of not Kirby squiggle, it's past Kirby squiggle. It's just a literal squiggle. With some hatching in there. I think it looks pretty cool. The actual character is kind of lame looking, but he's like an 80s type character. He's got ninja stars and stuff. You know, whatever movies you're watching in the 80s, mid to late 80s, you know, you got bad guys who look like this. And like even in this shot of this guy back here, starting to feel a bit of Art Adams there. He's definitely around in 88. I don't know what I was saying earlier. He was doing some X-Men stuff at least. So yeah, again, another kind of glimpse into some of his influences. I've talked about George Perez in this issue, and yeah, this for some reason just feels very Art Adams to me. And that influence, you know, the George Perez influence will kind of go away, and the Art Adams will take over at some point, probably around New Mutants, a little bit after this. Dragonlance, never even heard of this. kind of like this shot here, this guy. But yeah, I don't know how interesting that looks. Legion of Superheroes, they're not kids anymore. Oh no, look out. The Prisoner. Yeah, so I've been looking for the Prisoner book by Jack Kirby, the black and white that they reprinted just of his artwork, because the original was never actually published back in the day. Super hard to find, super expensive. Dear Lord. Hopefully I can find a non-expensive copy one day. So that is it, guys. Early days of Rob Liefeld, Hawk and Dove, issue number 3. Thoughts, comments, concerns, let me know in the comments below. If you are subscribed and you're still watching, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you're watching but are not subscribed, please do so below. It helps the channel grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books, just like we all are. So everyone out there, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!